Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 24th, 2023 instance of the Kubernetes SIG-Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Let's get started. So in terms of announcements, I don't see many new announcements. As always, the enhancements freeze is coming up. It's the next major milestone for this release. That's Thursday, February 9th. So that's a couple more weeks, a little over 2 weeks to get all of the enhancements and things tracked. I think we'll be talking about one of them today. Does anybody else have any new announcements? Okay, go into the next section, which is usually we give some space if there's anybody new to the call, any new contributors that would like to comment, say hi, introduce themselves. Feel free to do so. This is optional, but feel free to just unmute yourself and talk if you want. Okay, I guess we can go on to the agenda now. What's this first one? Update interval. Yes. Okay, took a look. James, you want to discuss this?
Sure. Yeah. So we got a report from a customer that they were seeing elevated CPU on their nodes. And when they dug into it, they found that the perf counters that we launched at the beginning of starting up Kubelet was taking up 30% of the CPU on the node. And they suggested that we increment the collection time from 1 second to 10 seconds. And when they did this, if you scroll down to the bottom, they saw like basically the CPU dropped 30% that was being consumed is gone. So they have a pretty huge improvement here. I guess I don't have any major concern with dropping or moving this up to 10 seconds. I guess the biggest thing I guess I would see is like, breaking a customer that was relying on 1 second usage, and now they're not getting the fidelity from, and maybe they're doing alerts or something on that, and we change the fidelity on them and cause kind of a issue within their monitoring system. I'm not sure how much of a concern that actually is, but I thought I'd bring it up here and see if anybody had any thoughts and concerns or questions.
If there are any concerns for this, maybe something like this could be configurable, like maybe 1 seconds or maybe 5 or so on. And secondly, don't remember exactly the time frame for perf counter, and if I remember correctly, it's over a couple of seconds, but I'm not sure over how many seconds. So maybe some loss of measurements might be lost if it's too high. I might be wrong on this.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns that I brought it up with one of our perf teams internally. That was one of his concerns as well. Yeah, I mean, I think configuration is possible, but do we want to map something all the way through Kubelet, like startup flags, or, I like, is it worth that? Is kind of what I was wondering. Or I guess we could maybe have an environment variable, but I don't know. That feels like a slippery slope as well.
Yeah.
So
I'll take a look at this too. I thought that like I don't think I see any concerns with having a 10-second interval. Do we know if it gets better with like 5 seconds or 10 seconds? And would this be for, I guess this is just for WinStats, right? So
yeah, it's literally for the metrics endpoint. In like, if you go to Kubelet/metrics,
Yeah.
that's where this data is showing up. And so if anybody's scraping that, the fidelity of the metrics would change with this change.
Does this have any impact on the CRI list or the CRI stats, C advisor list stats too? Kept.
Yeah,
guess
this would
metrics.
go down into the CRI
Yeah.
instead of being exposed here. But as far as like the stats for the like CPU and things that Kubelet uses to make decisions internally, I don't believe that this is used by that.
One other interesting thing is I wonder if CPU usage would go down if, depending on what the process priority is. I could see that this being another issue with contention, and if we give the kubelet more resources, it might fix it. I might try and something out with that, but I wonder if we should propose that this would be configurable in via your container runtime too, then in Cry API. That might be a good middle ground. How frequently to pull that?
Yeah, but I think, shouldn't there be a sane default if the 1 second is not, is causing problems? While we can make this configurable, like, I don't know, if 1 is bad, I don't know, maybe we go instead of 10, maybe we go to 5 or something as a default, and then also add the capability of making it configurable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was gonna see how much load was on there. And it looks like it's a default node. Do we know the size? I'll have a couple follow-up questions. I'm curious what node size they have.
Yeah.
And things like that. But I agree. And does it eventually settle down, or does it stay spike the whole time?
It sounds like it's a steady state, 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Arun, about the default. I just, changing the metrics collections feels like a breaking change to me, and I don't want to like break something downstream because somebody took a dependency on that. So,
but
Yeah,
at the same
fair
time,
enough.
it might fix a lot of other issues if we're not like spending CPU cycles there. So
Yeah, that's what I was going towards is, yeah, sure, it might be a breaking change, but is that preferable to a non-functioning workload, for example?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest thing in here is to just bump the change and call it out as a breaking change. But
yeah, I'm curious if we could get away with like 5 seconds or something like that. But
I mean, at least in this case, if you change the interval at which these are reported, it mostly just affects the monitoring systems, right? Whereas, with the 30% CPU, we're impacting the actual business application.
I thought that the most of like the eviction stuff in HPA is based off of the stats endpoints, not the metrics endpoints. So
correct. Yep.
That is maybe another reason to just bump it. But there could be people who are using the metrics endpoints for reacting to things, but I'm not aware
Scaling, yeah, exactly. That, I guess, like it is just affecting the metrics endpoint, but if someone's using it to scale or something like that, then all of a sudden they may not be scaling in time or something like that. So, but I guess I'm leaning towards breaking change and ship it. But
yeah, I mean, it would still scale, right? It would just take a little longer.
Yep.
Well, and with the 30% CPU usage, there might be over provisioning as well, or just like, scaling too much because, you're kind of seeing the node as too overloaded just because of the metrics.
Yeah, I can add a comment. I think I would like to know what node size they're using, and it doesn't seem like they're doing any over provisioning, Brendan, because they say it's a fresh install. But it would be good to confirm if they only see this under load or not. And if the node size is reasonable and if they're not over provisioning the node, I'm definitely in favor of just bumping it to 5 or 10 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't notice it was on a fresh install because I've not seen 30% on my fresh installed.
That's what I was wondering too. Like we do have the perf dashboard, like the perf test running, and we didn't see anything using 30% CPU. So unless they're using like a super, like potentially like a 1 or 2 core machine. Yeah. I'll keep this open and comment afterwards. Does anybody?
Yeah, I think we should get more data from here. I also wonder if it shouldn't be, but is it workload dependent? Are they running something interesting on there that's causing this? Which it shouldn't be, right? It's just a counter that's getting pulled. So, but yeah, I think we should ask them their node configuration and things like that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks for the input.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Did you add this, James? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Arvind, do you want to take over for a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so the whole node log query feature, that saga continues, but I think it has reached almost a breaking point, in my opinion. If you read Jordan's latest comment, he's basically saying that the log endpoint is going to be disabled by default. And they are strongly suggesting not to enable this for conformance purposes. I think they're having security concerns about this being, open in the first place, and it's been since I don't know, I don't know when they added this log endpoint in the kubelet, but it's always been there as far as I know. But it looks like Jordan is saying like we shouldn't do this. And I spoke about this internally within Red Hat also, and the posture there is like, yeah, this looks like it's eventually going to go away is what they're saying. So yeah, thoughts, do we still keep moving forward trying to get this in? Because if Jordan is not going to approve this, right, if it's actually a hard no from him, even though him being he's not being clear about this, I could ask more questions and get clarity on that. But I'm a little hesitant about continuing work on this and then Jordan finally saying, no, we should really not do this, right? It's better to get that sort of feedback early on. This has been going on a little too long, I feel. Ideally, this sort of feedback should have been given at the KEP stage, and we should have never even, started down the path of the implementation. But I almost think we need to reconsider this. Do we need to come up with like alternatives, like having a static pod that's running on Windows nodes and Linux nodes if needed, that performs this sort of similar capability, and then having a separate client that hits this endpoint and not go through kubectl at all. So opening the floor for comments.
Do you have the bandwidth to keep fighting this fight? Because if so, I mean, nobody has said no yet, but like,
But
like that's the big thing is like, how do you feel, Arvind? Like,
my thought is this the best use of my bandwidth?
Yeah,
I can keep fighting it, but if it's not going to go in, I mean, it's just, just getting bounced from what do you call release to release.
yeah, I think I added a comment on here because I did see this, and my comment was Jordan's comments seem kind of specific to things that definitely run in pods, like the Kube API server, and they don't want to expose, they want to limit the surface area of that. At least on Windows, we run the kubelet on the system, so and probably a lot of Linux installs do that too.
You cannot put the kubelet in a container, right?
No, so no. So my comment was like I think that Jordan's comments might make sense for a lot of the core components, but I don't know if that's applicable to Node. And I kind of asked here if some of the Node leads, if somebody could comment. I think if somebody from Node comes and says, oh yes, we absolutely want to limit the ability to the logs endpoint for the kubelet too, then that's probably a good sign to just like step away from this. If somebody from Node is really interested in this, like I could see, I feel like they should say like this, like limiting the exposure to the logs endpoint makes sense for some components, but for kubelet it's not. So I don't know if who we need to discuss or who we need to have comment on that. Nobody from Node responded yet, but also I think it's up to you too. I know, like what Jay said, bandits, you want to keep doing this. It's been a long journey, and even though nobody said no explicitly, we haven't gotten the yeses we need either.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's your decision, Arvind. Like, it's up to you. Like, you can put this on the floor if you feel like it's a waste of time or not. And I think either way, we're going to support you. Like, I totally could see this going either way. Like, because I think that we want this feature as a SIG. It's not like we're all changing our mind after reading that one comment, right?
Yeah.
For us, it's the same thing. We want to do kubectl get logs and see why containerd like not doing anything. Like,
I think
like
what I would like to see is, for one, I think Mark has a good point. We should talk to someone from the Node team, because I need to go back and get reviews from the Node folks also, right? And if they're going to also push back, because they're not seeing this, because the way I looked at it is, okay, let me get buy-in from Jordan and Tim, and then I'll go back and ask the Node folks. But we're already sort of not getting full buy-in from Jordan, is what I'm seeing.
So you feel like it's going to snowball? Like, yeah,
I think that's my fear.
Nobody's going to Superman's not going to come out of the clouds and like.
Correct. Yeah.
There's just going to
no one is going to say no, but no one is going to say yes either, and it's just going to like kind of,
I mean, with KPMG, it's kind of was in the same situation. Nobody was saying no, and we could have kept pushing it forward, but it seemed like the best thing to do is to make the Win proxy out of tree and use KPMG. That was kind of where we converged. And if you think that a better use of your time is to do an external thing, I don't think you regret that.
No, I mean,
when you look back on your life, 50 years from now, I don't think you think to yourself, oh man, I should have put that in tree. Like, that's not going to be the thing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think Mark has a good point. Let's talk to the Node folks. I know that there's a Node call right after this. I don't know how full that agenda is. If not this week, maybe next week, we could try and put something on the agenda, and I can try and, I don't think I can attend the call this week.
I can only attend for the first half, and it does look like there's a lot on the call. Let's plan on doing it tomorrow. Maybe let's also ask Jordan, and I can do that on PR too. Like, I think we should get consensus from Node, and we should ask Jordan if Node agrees that this is something that they want. Will that alleviate your concerns? Or because if he comes back and says, I still have concerns, even if Node thinks this is a good thing to do, that's not a good sign. But if he comes back and says, I'm just looking out for what's best for the project and for the components that I'm most familiar with, I don't agree that this is the right thing to do. But if Node does agree it's the right thing to do, I'm okay with that. If that's the answer that we get, then I think it makes sense to go to Node. But if there's still concern, even if Node says we kind of want to do this,
like do optimize your time, I think is the
Yeah.
advice here. Like don't waste your time, like just for your own sanity, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
tell us how
I-
we can help you optimize your time too, right? Like, yeah, we all run into this. This is great. Like the thing is that like we figured all this out from having done all this work. So I consider this a huge step forward for us. We all want this. If the conclusion
I
is we
mean-
build our own thing, we go build our own thing, and that'll be more fun than doing this.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think what we can do is, independent of even asking Jordan, let's just get the Node side of the story. Because if Node says no, it's easy for Jordan, right? That's like, hey, he's like, okay, Node is already saying no. So let's get the feedback from the Node team and see where to go with that. And then we can post back at Jordan and ask him also. So what we can do is, I don't know what we want to do with the PR at the moment, Mark. Would you want me to add more comments? Or do we just add this as an agenda item to the Node side?
Yeah, let's add this as an agenda item to the Node side. Let's also ask, I think we could do both. I think we could ask Jordan and say, hey, Jordan, if Node thinks that this is still something that they want, do you still have concerns?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but technically right now it is possible to get the logs from kubelet or whatever node if you just spawn a pod on a particular node and you create a host path mount to /var/log or whatever inside the container, right?
Yeah,
And then
there are
you
ways
can
to do it.
then you can basically exec into the pod and get the logs and whatever you need. So
Totally.
what's wrong in simply formalizing this type of behavior and having an explicit API for this to simplify the user experience than to just, have this capability anyways, but they have to jump through a couple of hoops to create the pods and so on to have those logs that the user needs.
That's a good point.
So
Claudio.
I think I asked that question like way back when we first doing this, and that the answer that I remember was if kubelet doesn't boot up and you can't run pods, then you can't get logs. And this happens on Windows fairly regularly, and it makes it challenging to get into the node and figure out what's going on. And so that was kind of the use case from my understanding.
Yeah, I think Claudio is actually, his point is you can anyways do this with a very high privilege pod. So what's the harm in doing this through the kubelet by default, right, Claudio?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Basically.
what I was, and yeah, I thought that this was discussed in the KEP a lot, like we said, because we did say, especially like with host process containers, you can also get this information without even doing a volume mount. But there's enough instances of, your CNI is misconfigured or something where you can't, or something's misconfigured where you can't start the pods to do that. So this was, the whole motivation of this feature was to make it easy and provide a consistent way to do that.
There was some talk about like trying to get this done using a static pod. Are static pods not that dependent on the kubelet?
They are dependent on the kubelet. The kubelet monitors the manifest directory, and then when a new file is there, it makes one, and then it makes a mirror pod on the API server.
I think they're not dependent on like the kube scheduler and things like that.
Yeah, they don't need the API server. They don't need the scheduler, but they do need the kubelet.
Okay. But I guess you would just need, because even this feature needs a kubelet, right? So I guess the static pod would not use CNI and things like that, right? So you could still say, I could drop a static pod in here and look at it. But this is exactly what Claudio is saying. If you can do that using that, why not do it? But David had a good explanation about this, about, because the static pod would have the exact privileges needed to do this as part of like even doing these get log commands that we are adding here. Yeah, so I don't know.
Well, there's an RBAC model in Kubernetes. So the counter argument to Claudio's point is that there is an RBAC model in Kubernetes. There's not an RBAC model being proposed here for this thing. So
yeah,
like you could easily make a counter argument against Claudio's thing. If somebody really just didn't want this feature, like they could make a secure. In general, if somebody doesn't want a feature, they can always make a security argument, and that's certainly so here, right? So,
well, but I thought like putting it in there, like for scheduling a pod that does that, there's like the pod security policies, pod security standards. What Arvind is doing is he's adding things to the API, which means like,
yeah, but even
like
the
you
API,
can make your own RBAC policies.
Even the API can be disabled through the feature gate, right? So if you just put in it disabled whatever it is, you basically disable the API for this.
Yeah, but the feature gate they say is temporary, right? Like you'll eventually remove the feature gate. So this would not even be behind a feature gate. There would be like an option that you add here. That's going to be always disabled. I think that's what, at a minimum, Jordan is suggesting.
And also you're embedding the thing into the kubelet itself as opposed to in a container. So that's what Antonio's comment is. There's no way to like, I mean, yeah. I think your intuition is correct, I think, Arvind, that like you just need to decide what the best use of your time is here. And like
make sure that folks from Node aren't like think that this is so good, and then you can see
that's the smartest thing to do, is to just have a couple of really direct conversations with people and say, look, I don't want to spend any more time on this unless you think it's useful, because it's a waste of my time, right? Like, we had to ask Tim that once for the KPMG stuff. Like at some point we're like, okay, look, sounds like y'all like this. Do we want to do this or not? He's like, yep, do this, this, and this. And we're like, okay. And we kind of like took that in stride, and we're like, okay, at some point we will do all of those things, but we still decided to fork the Windows proxy anyways for now, right? So just so we could get it done. And so I think, Jordan's a nice guy, Tim's a nice guy. You just talk to him and be like, look, here's the deal. Like, I need to, I'm just trying to decide whether I should keep doing this or not, right? Like,
yeah, I think so. The way forward is, at least in my mind, is, talk to the Node team, see what they have to say about this. If their answer is also hesitancy / no, then we need to drop this and figure out what is the other way around, because Node definitely being hesitant is just going to give Jordan more data points that, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. And Node also does not think it's a good idea. Because there's very little reason for us to ask Jordan, hey, if Node says yes, are you okay with it, right? Let's just get that answer from Node.
Yeah.
And let's make sure that when we bring the question to Node, it's more of like the holistic, like these are the concerns that Jordan has, instead of just saying, can you review the code changes?
Exactly, which is why I think we put it as an agenda item and talk to them rather than asking someone to review this.
Yeah. Yeah, and let them know the situation of just how much time do we invest in it, right? Because, we don't want them to put the decision making off and then we spend another 2 weeks waiting for that, right? Like, if they're willing to work with us on the feature, we could keep going,
Yeah, so I think the outcome of this is, we put this on the Node team. I can't plan to attend it this week, but we can add it to the agenda next week and try and attend the meeting next week.
Yeah, I don't think I can talk about it this week either.
Yeah,
but I do want to join some of the Node discussions pretty soon. Yeah,
I have to drop everybody, but I'm going to be pairing with David on some stuff this week on the SIG-Windows DevTools stuff, and building some CI for the kube proxy, Windows Service Proxy with Damon, who's a new person who's going to be getting involved. So if anybody wants to join us in any of that, let me know. I'll be around.
I'll probably join too. Next week I can give an update on the kube proxy or the Windows Service Proxy stuff too.
Cool. Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome, Mark. That thing you showed me the other day. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess a teaser. I had a Kappa-Z cluster that was running Calico and the new kube proxy, and I was able to deploy some IIS pods and put it behind a load balancer and get the external traffic routed to it. So it's a big step. Now I'm just struggling with the prow job, trying to figure out why I can't access the build kit commands from the Docker CLI, even though they're in the image and we're using the same image that we're using to build the pause image, which calls build kit. But I'll struggle with that later. All right, yeah, I need to drop too, so I think I'm just gonna end the meeting for everybody. Thank you for attending, and see everybody next week. Bye all.